Again, welcome to the Alliance's weekly webinar, holiday edition. My name is Dave Miller. I'm the program director here at the Alliance, and I use he, him, his pronouns. You know, it seems like in Mississippi, we are, just like our country and our world right now, 2020 is making history, sometimes in good ways and sometimes not so good ways. But it's an important and historic time to be here. And I'm happy that all of you are here with us for conversations around what this moment means for us and our organizations and how we are engaging with that. You know, it struck me yesterday, I was watching the news with what's going on in China and Hong Kong right now. And I think about, you know, in the theme of July 4th, while we are not a perfect union yet, in this country, we at least have the opportunity to speak our voice and to, when more often than not, although there's a lot of folks who don't have the opportunity to speak their voice without horrific consequences, but we are striving to make that more accessible and make that a space where all voices are welcome and heard. But, you know, that freedom of speech and the ability to stand up and speak and protest when there are injustices. And I think we in this country and in this state are seeing the power of what happens when people take advantage of that, and we have that opportunity to drive change. And so this was a very powerful week in our state, and certainly a happy moment to see a symbol of hate and division come down the other day. And I just thank you all for doing the work that you're doing and standing up for the rights and justices of others in our state, as we try and make our country and our homes and our states as welcoming and as inclusive and as prosperous for everybody. So thank you for the work that you do, and just something I'm thinking about on this July 4th holiday. So I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Just saying on the front end, but we'll say it on the back end too. So thanks for taking the time to be here on this eve. And we are unfortunately going to take a moment of silence because we have crossed yet again another very grim milestone in terms of the lives lost in our country. And so as we are coming dangerously close to 130,000 lives lost due to COVID, that is a terrifying number. You know, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they talked about how with 100,000 people or 99,000 people who would die through another cause, it'd be like a jet airliner going down every day for a year. And I just think about that was just 100,000, and we have crossed that threshold and far beyond in the span of a few months. And so it is horrific what is happening. And I keep that on my mind when I can, but I'm glad that we can come together and try and talk about how we can address that. So for now, let's take a moment of silence and acknowledge those lives that have been lost. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we're gonna switch to some more positive and uplifting news. As you can see on your screen, we have some amazing presentations set up for today, and I am incredibly excited and have had the opportunity to get to know Justin Burch over several conversations. He's an incredible person doing incredible work. Although the full name is Local Initiative Support Corporation, it is commonly known as LISC. I have learned a lot in leading up to this, and so I know there are a lot of folks who have some learning to do as well. And so I'm excited to have Justin here. We also have the pleasure of being joined by Operation Shoestring, Executive Director Robert Langford, and Programs Director Amber May, two amazing human beings and people doing incredible work. I have had the pleasure of knowing them for several years now, and am really excited for you all to hear from them. They are incredible people, and so just today is going to be a great day. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Justin. Justin, the floor is yours.
All right, is the screen shared yet?
Yes.
Let's see if we can get that. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining today. Again, I'm with Local Initiative Support Corporation. We came out of the intermediary movement with Ford Foundation and the Clinton administration, and the 90s just really loved a long acronym. So hence our extremely long name and our acronym of LISC. I am part of the rural body of the organization, so we only serve communities of 50,000 or less. So we are in 45 states currently and 2 U.S. territories. In Mississippi, you know, we all have our pets, tends to be one of mine, and we have made a strategic focus out of places that are persistent poverty, but where rural really intersects with communities of color. So the Mississippi Delta, to include the states of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Tennessee, are a big part of what we do. We work with and through community development corporations with our HUD section for allocation from the U.S. Senate. So a lot of our money tends to come from there, but rural is also a huge intermediary for philanthropic funds. So while we are not a foundation or philanthropy, we do tend to be a major funder in places that typically do not see investment. Some of you may have recently applied for our COVID relief grant in the state of Mississippi, but we are funding other initiatives currently within the state, everything from the Rockefeller Innovation Bonus to Aspen Opportunity Youth, to some system change work with IDEO.org. So we recently came up with something called the Rural Promise. As many of you may know, Mississippi is one of the most philanthropically under-resourced places in the country, representing about $41 per person when you have a nationwide average of 451. We believe a lot of that is due to the state's rural nature. So Mississippi is 4th in the country in terms of being rural, and we sort of make that an equity issue. So we believe that rural is a culture and not just a geography. And when we look at how philanthropic money flows to rural places, about 20% of the population is in rural America, yet only receives about 6% of private grant dollars. There's other places that have it even worse. You know, First Nations and tribals, about 2% of the country, and they receive less than 0.04%. So we have made a promise and tried to get out and lead and say that we're going to invest at least 20% of our resources in rural places like Mississippi. These are some of our programmatic priorities. So, and I'll kind of dive into them in the rest of the slide, but capacity building is probably where LISC tends to lead and really try to push our convening power. So a lot of our dollars are not super tied to programs. We kind of consider them keep the doors open money. So in places like Mississippi, you know, we want executive directors to be focusing their attention on populations and not keeping the lights on and not keeping the doors open. So a lot of our funding tends to be super flexible around staff and salaries, de minimis, supplies, rent, things of that nature. But we also do fund special programming. We have catalyzing economic development, which has a couple branches that we'll get into. Small business development, district development, which is kind of our fancy word for placemaking. Disaster recovery. So as you can imagine, especially during this time of COVID, resiliency is becoming a bigger and bigger programmatic bucket, especially in rural places. Housing initiatives, which is probably where most people have seen lists traditionally operate, also in the lending space. So while we are the country's largest and oldest CDFI, we also tend to be that intermediary for CDFIs. So in places like Mississippi, we have partnerships with Hope and Southern Bancorp, Communities Unlimited. But we also have some Native American initiatives that we are currently building out as well. And then we also try to push out rural e-news in our annual seminar, which is our efforts at sort of connecting the dots for rural places so they can really glean lessons from each other. So going into just some of our bits and pieces, so capacity building, this has been at the center of our work for 25 years, and we put about 40 million in capacity building grants, plus 14.5 million in project-related grants in rural America. So for Mississippi, we've had a couple of place-based strategic priorities. It's not to say we don't often go outside of those buckets, but for us, that's been Biloxi, Collins, Canton, Mississippi, Tunica, Indianola, and then we have always sort of taken a really deep dive in Greenville, Mississippi, especially around issues of economic mobility. So our capacity building grants generally are for $35,000, and that's for a 2-year period. I like to think of them more as participation grants for our on-the-ground partners in rural places. It includes the travel scholarships. It offers them, again, just some of those dollars to really think through in a flexible way how they can use them to keep their doors open. We usually layer on top of this $35,000 twice a year in addition to their participation grant. So generally site specific, they walk away with usually a minimum of about 60 grand a year when we look through our other grant opportunities. Now that can range across different sites. So especially as rural is that funding intermediary, places like Greenville probably walk away somewhere with around $600,000 to $700,000 in grant money every single year. And this just kind of goes into just a little bit more of how we use it. So they're critical to increasing the capacity of the local partners. So usually when they're launching new initiatives, some of our organizations, they really get tied down into some of their anchor work. And aren't oftentimes given the money to sort of test new ideas, and we want to make sure that that's happening in rural America. Board development is huge in rural places, organizational advancement, succession planning. So again, as you know, the silver tsunami is just washing right over rural America, and we're seeing a lot of capacity with organizations die with individuals. So really making sure in places like Itabena or Mount Bayou, where there's been an executive director for 40 years, we want to make sure that that torch gets passed to someone so we don't lose it with that individual. And then expanding project development skill set. So we make a lot of investments in people's personal and professional development in rural places, and have strategic pots of money for them to get credentialed, for them to attend seminars or trainings throughout the country. So our catalyzing economic development, that is becoming a new strategic focus for us. So our CEO, Maurice Jones, has decided that 50% of our resources will actually move over into this economic development space, which is sort of a new train of work for our organization. For us, that goes in 3 different buckets. For us, that's workforce development, which is something that's in my portfolio and I do a lot of work around, small business development, and then district development. So the workforce development is a big part of what we're doing in Mississippi. And again, those grants I mentioned earlier around Aspen Opportunity Youth is workforce specific. So investing in disconnected youth ages 16 to 24 to try to get them back to the education and workforce system is a big part of that. The Rockefeller money and the Walton money that we get is often attached to returning citizens. So as you can imagine, Mississippi has a high incarceration rate, and we want to make sure that we're giving returning citizens every benefit and our absolute best as they're exiting systems so that they can return back to communities and receive some holistic support around rapid reattachment to housing and workforce development. So we take a deep dive within that to make sure people have access to livable wage jobs and actually can achieve some level of economic mobility in rural places. Our small business development. So as you can imagine, there are not a lot of entrepreneurial support organizations operating in rural places. Mississippi is certainly one of those. There's a couple in the state, but tend to be within the bounds of more metros like the Mississippi Gulf Coast, peripheral of Memphis, and then Jackson. So we try to invest a good deal of our funding, and we specifically target marginalized populations, so people of color, women, people who have different abilities within small business. So we're providing that capital, but at the same time trying to invest in organizations that can build up the capacity of local entrepreneurs and take their goods to market. And this just tells you some of the things we can fund. So working capital, equipment purchase funds, business acquisition funds, and then providing capital to startups. The other big part of what LIST does is through our partners, Amido and NEF and New Market Tax Credit, is we try to fund different projects within Mississippi. I know we just did one, I think for $2.5 million in Greenwood, Mississippi, to help an employer there get new equipment and expand. So they were able to go through us with New Markets, and we'll be adding about 35 full-time exempt employees to their payrolls. And we were able to give them certain lending terms that they might not have found in state or otherwise outside of it to really kind of continue that growth. So district development, again, I always hate our terminology there because it's just placemaking. So we try to invest in Main Street programs to make sure that there's some quality and merit of art in rural places. And this goes a little bit more into it. So it sort of blends with that small business strategy to make sure there's rural innovation hubs. Broadband and digital literacy is a place that LISC is really starting to invest a lot of resources in as well. And then the placemaking in Mississippi has really extended to ensuring some of the sort of cultural treasures within the state are able to sustain themselves. For Mississippi, that's typically been the Delta Blues and Heritage Festival, the Delta Hot Tamale Festival, and then making small Main Street programs, investments within the communities I've named earlier. So disaster for us really started with Hurricane Maria about 2.5, 3 years ago. It started as contract work, and wouldn't you know it, there was a disaster in rural America every single year since. So that is now a team of 3 instead of contract work with us. In Mississippi, that work has really manifested itself around issues of flooding, but is slowly starting to change its trajectory to have more of a COVID focus, and is diving into some issues of rural healthcare. Healthy housing, so we have that open right now. That is a strategically broad category where we are making investments in public housing in the state of Mississippi, doing a lot of remediation, doing retrofits for energy efficiency, making sure that there's smoking gestation programs, and we're removing allergens, and especially in places that are more rural, you're dealing with a super aging housing stock. But making sure that they have, they're asbestos free, they're lead free, and that they're getting the updates they need for people to live a healthy lifestyle, but can also age in place. Within that, we have different lending products, but the one that tends to be the most popular in Mississippi is what we call a repayable investment. It's also a 0% interest loan that can be forgiven. So it's up to $20,000, and we're able to remove that as something that has to be repaid if you can demonstrate necessity for it. So that one tends to be really popular in Mississippi. We also are making those healthy housing investments through Wells Fargo. So they have been a great partner for us within the state. This is just an example of some of the projects we've done. This one is in New York, and we actually took a group from Mississippi and Greenville to tour it. So it was an abandoned factory that they were able to turn into artisan housing, but low income. And at the same time, the artists that moved into it were able to do a lot of placemaking within that community. And I think we have a lot of interest in extending what quality and affordable housing at the intersection of placemaking looks like in the Mississippi Delta, considering a lot of the really cool cultural opportunities. So again, lending is our bread and butter. We do have a lot of terms that are favorable. We oftentimes will push you to a local CDFI since we're the intermediary for them. But if they can't make it work, or it's a particularly large deal where they cannot manage the risk, LISC is usually that entity that can partner lend to make deals work, especially large ones in the state of Mississippi. And this just goes into some of the places that we make this work. We have specialized products that, again, are around the 0% interest loans, the recoverable. And if anyone has interest in that, I believe Dave will be sending out the presentation afterwards that will have my contact information. We're certainly happy to talk you through the lending products, but if that's not of interest, we can also talk through the grant making ones as well. And this just kind of gives you some of those projects where we are providing some of that equity. So affordable home ownership housing, we're really seeing a lot of demand for that in places like Canton, in northern Madison County. Sunflower County has been another big one for us lately, as well as Tunica. But rental housing, mixed use developments, commercial products, and community facilities. This just gives you a little bit, if you are interested in becoming a partner, most of our interest is around community development corporations, but especially as we're getting into that economic development, anybody who's in that workforce, small business, but also sort of the artistic community as well. We're making investments in, and we're always interested in new proposals. If anyone is interested in joining our e-news, where we sort of concentrate a list of national rural funders and opportunities for funding, you can go to our website to sign up for that, or email Sue Felsky on our team, and I have her email listed there. And that's Rural List. So again, we're making strategic investments in Mississippi. I think we have a lot of interest in how we can partner with different organizations to grow their capacity. And we are happy to be a standing partner during this time as we're going through all of these issues of a pandemic and, loss of jobs and loss of lives, but also during this moment of racial equity and healing. So LISC is making a lot of investments there and rethinking through how our investments will continue to move the needle within that realm. So again, we're a thought partner, we're a funder. If there's anything we can do to assist you, my contact information will be included with the PowerPoint, and you can always visit us at list.org/rural for additional information.
Thank you, Justin. This was fantastic. An incredible amount of very useful information. We do have some questions here in the chat, so we'll take those. And if anybody would like to ask questions, feel free to pop those in the chat, or once I finish with some of these questions, I'll also open it up for you to turn on your microphones. So the first one is, we have several comments about people who have done their research during your presentation and want to know, Justin, where are you based out of?
So
lots of interest.
Yeah, so I have a portfolio that goes from Texas to Alabama all the way up to Missouri. I am based in Little Rock, Arkansas, but my heart is firmly planted in Mississippi. I'm originally from a small town called Brookland, Mississippi in the Pine Belt.
Wonderful. And then Nancy asked, would LISC consider grants or loans to rural electric cooperatives to help address the digital divide that has become so visible with COVID-19 and required schooling from home? This was authorized but not funded by the legislature last year.
Yep, so we're actually made an offer to someone today to come on full time to handle our digital literacy component, but also our broadband work. Some of the work, depending on where we're at in the country. So I know we just made a lot of investments in electrical cooperatives in colonias communities along the New Mexico and Arizona border. And we did the same in North Carolina in Winston-Salem. So that's been a model that has been funded with us, as well as making other investments, with NACO around the test IT. And I'll do a quick plug for them. If any of you are interested in finding out what your community's broadband capabilities are and don't feel like you're being represented properly by the federal government tracking system, we did develop a the Test IT app with NACO and the Aspen Institute that you can download. You press one simple button and it'll tell you exactly where your community stands, and it will register it with the federal government. So one of the biggest pieces that I think we're making investments in now outside of just the programmatic work is data. And we just don't have the right data to really see a policy shift. And ultimately the solution here around rural broadband is major and strategic investments from Congress. So I think we are trying to lead that way with a couple of stakeholders to see that happen. But yes, that would be a project that could potentially be funded to us.
Wonderful. Any other, we have time for about one question. And then of course, always, if you have other questions, you can pop them in the chat throughout and we can address those at the end of our weekly webinar. But we do have time for one more comment question. Anybody out there? Okay. Well, if you think of any, feel free, like I said, to pop it in the chat. Thank you, Justin, very, very much. And now I'm going to do a pivot here. So, folks, real talk conversation for a moment. We have been talking for a while now about discounted trainings. And y'all, except for Robert, Justin, and Amber, who are forgiven because they haven't been here, y'all get these emails. I know you do. So you see on your screen our July training catalog. If you sign up, and I feel like I'm gonna put my salesman hat on right now. If you sign up before the webinar is over, or shortly thereafter, because you want you to pay attention to Robert and Amber. If you sign up for 3, you get one of them for free at the $15 rate. So folks, sign up. And I really want to highlight, this month we have some incredible trainings, and I want to highlight one that's coming on later this month. On July 29th, we have our Executive Director Roundtable. This is something that we're going to start to do on a very, very regular basis. And the exciting thing about this roundtable is that it's going to be focused on executive directors who are women of color from throughout Mississippi. So Portia Espy is going to be our narrator, and we will have the list of speakers coming soon, but this is going to be amazing. You should sign up for that if nothing else. So please, folks, take some time, take a look at our trainings. They are really incredible. So you may be saying to yourself, but Dave, how do I do this? All I see is a flyer. I'm so glad you asked. That is so nice of you. So here's our website. Now, if you have never been to the Alliance website, it's a great resource. There's a ton of great stuff on there. So here's what you got to do. You go to Learn right at the top. You see trainings. It's the first option. You can't miss it. And if you do, call me. When you get there, you'll see this screen pop up with an image. There we go. It has the pricing on there. And then when you click in orange, view training catalog and register, you're gonna click on that. When you click on that, you will see that you can register and research every single training in one screen. Oh yeah, one screen. So when you click on one of them, so let's take a look at Quick Bite Guide Star Advanced on July 3rd. You click on it, it drops down. It tells you the day of the week. It tells you the time to be there. You can look at who your trainer is going to be, and you can learn more about your trainer. When you click on Learn More, their whole bio pops up. It's amazing. Then you can go back and finish registering. You can look at your course description. You can look at the key learning objectives. And then you're going to hop over here and you're going to put in your name, your email, your organization, if you're a member of the Alliance, your address, your phone so we can call you and say hi. And then you're going to click on all of the registrations you want to register for. And feel free to click on all 15. That's okay. We're not judging. And then we'll call you and we'll email you and we're going to get you hooked up. So folks, please register for these. They really are amazing. I'm not just saying that. They really are. And I want you to also think for a second outside the box. A lot of times trainings wind up being restricted or thought of as just for leadership of organizations. Think about your capacity building, folks. Think about the individuals on staff who are looking for opportunities to engage in important conversations, to grow their skills, and for you as leaders of your organizations, the skills that can help support your organization. So please think about the members of your staff who could find value in this as well, not just for yourself. So I'm going to get off my stunt stool now. Thank you for allowing me to do that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Robert Langford, who is going to be talking about Operation Shoestring. Robert, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And clearly you've got a bright future in sales. So outstanding work there.
Lots of QVC time with my mom.
Exactly. There's a wonderful band called Fountains of Wayne, and they have a song called Bright Future in Sales, and it was playing through my head as you were talking. I do want to say, Justin, thank you. Y'all are doing amazing work, and I didn't know anything about your organization before yesterday. Anyway, and what it really underscores is sort of to paraphrase something that a friend and kind of mentor of mine, Vaughn Gordon, said about Mississippi. There's no shortage of people doing amazing work here in the state. There's a kind of a lack of coordination and connectivity around those things. And the Alliance is really acting as a great connector for those of us who are kind of working in the salt mines doing this important work. So anyway, please keep up the great work that y'all are doing at LISC. Don't ask me to tell you what the acronym is. I've written it somewhere though, or what the acronym stands for. So I want to talk, speaking of what Dave said, pivots, I want to talk about our work in the context of the pivot that we've done since the apocalypse arrived in March in Mississippi. And what my colleague Amber May and I want to do is to have two different parts of that and leave enough time for some questions at the end. And as we talk, I would invite all of you to kind of think about the pivots that you've made or are making or maybe might need to make, and see if there might be some parallels in what we've learned about what is working, what doesn't work, that might resonate with you. And we also just are happy to hopefully share some of what our work is about with you, if that's helpful too. So I'm going to start, and then Amber's going to really dig into the deep part, but I want to provide the context, which is kind of big picture what our work is about. So we are 52 years old, founded in 1968. Really in response to the travails of the first civil rights movement. We are clearly in another iteration of it now, thankfully. And it was founded by a group of people who really listened to the voices of neighborhood residents in a low-income Central Jackson community about what their needs were and what they hoped for their kids and what they wanted for their community. And the number one priority was to create safe places, literally, for children to play in the neighborhood that we serve on the bottom of Bailey Avenue, right in the heart of Jackson. And within a couple of years, the organization was founded as a 501c3 nonprofit in 1968. And ever since then, we have run programs addressing the needs of kids and families, being directed by what kids and families have told us they need, and also looking at the data and not acting on assumptions, well-intentioned or otherwise, but really being driven by what the folks that we serve have sort of demanded and what the data tells us is appropriate, and marrying those with our kind of capacity and growing our capacity. So what that has looked like for 52 years is a whole bunch of different things. We have run a medical clinic. We did that for the first 12 years of our organization, sort of first kind of formal professional free clinic in Jackson. And we ran a big early childhood program until I think the Welfare Reform Act of the 90s really gutted how that could be funded for low-income communities. And where we have ended up is in a place that we've always operated in, but it's now become our forte, and that's in after-school and summer programs for school-age kids, and that's pre-K through 12th grade, with the sort of greatest number of kids being in elementary schools. So we are focused on academics, we're focused on social and emotional learning, you know, and we're focused on parent engagement as another part of that. So we connect with the parents of the families of the kids in our after school and summer programs. And it's, you know, after school work is something that for us, it's like all of our work has to be done collaboratively. We have certified teachers that come in and provide focused interventions with students that need it. We have a lot of what we call, I guess there would be assistant teachers who are running a lot of the hands-on lessons and organizing how after school happens for our kids and families. We are running a program, or were until mid-March, for about 250 elementary school age kids, about 30 high school kids in a leadership development program. And most of our work is focused chiefly on one neighborhood in Central Jackson. One of the things that if you run an effective after-school program, one of the sort of emblems of that is having a linkage to the school day. And so we have a good partnership with Jackson Public Schools and with the schools, specific schools with which we partner. And some of the great outcomes that we have seen on the investment that we've been making in our programs are average test scores and school attendance rates and parent engagement are all significantly higher than the peers of the kids in our schools who don't participate in our programs. And those are the kind of investments you should see, right? So you have a good yield on your investment in kids and families. So March 16th was sort of the date that I have burned into my brain, is when the bottom dropped out in Jackson and everything really started to shut down. And we, probably like a number of you on the call this morning, had a momentary deer in the headlights, expletive moment. What do we do? And very, very quickly, we got over that, and we looked hard at who we were as an organization, and we looked at our community, and we knew that we had to be responsive to carry out our mission, and we knew we had to be sort of visible to our community that we served in order to do that. And I'm going to sort of turn it over to Amber to have her talk about what we built out in response to that in order to continue our mission, but to figure out how to execute it in a sort of a differently articulated way.
Great. So can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. So as we start thinking about what is it they want to do as an organization to continue to support our children and families, we found that asking ourselves some key questions really helped us to detail the process by which we were going to be able to design the programming that was needed. So the first question we kind of asked ourselves is, what exactly is it that we're providing? What's the value? Who are we servicing? What are we providing them? And how are we going to do that? And then what do we want to make sure is really, really important in that process? So this ended up being our value proposition in terms of, we know that we want to prepare a virtual remote summer program, mainly to ensure that our children were being safe, that our families being safe, but that also that we were looking out for the safety of our staff as well, and limiting the opportunity for exposure and also community spread. And then identifying how are we going to do that, how we're going to put these pieces together to be able to develop this dynamic and very out of the box and things that we've never done before type programming. After we then identified our value proposition, we really kind of asked ourselves some tough questions in terms of what must we do? If there's nothing else that we're going to ensure that we do to ensure that we're providing these activities, what do we need to make sure is paramount most often? So you have be easily accessible. We know we want the activities to be designed to be engaging. We know that as the world has to go into this very remote and digital space and distance learning, engagement is kind of one of those things you have to take in consideration to ensure that students are really participating as well. We knew that we had to be very strategic in our execution. We had to make sure we had all the pieces in place and understood the process by which we were going to utilize those to really pull this off, especially as we are not able to interact with each other in a manner in which we normally have. A lot of times, if we were in the office and I had to ask Robert a question, it's just as simple as me going and walking to this office. But in this new environment, I got to send a text message. We got to identify when to do a phone call or a Zoom. So you really had to make sure all those pieces are there. We wanted to make sure that we also engage our community partners. For our summer program, we typically have about 300 volunteers that help us to put on activities for roughly 255 students across in Jackson. And we want to make sure that we still partner with them, but also making sure that we're making sure that they're being safe and what's the best way that they can help us out. And then, of course, what are our protocols? As we're coming together to kind of put materials together, how are we going to ensure that everyone is safe? How are we going to ensure that we're not lending ourselves to have our staff in those conditions that can affect their health, but also as we're interacting with our children and families as well, because that was a really, really big departure for us. As an after-school program provider, one thing that we've identified that really has helped us to engage our parents is being able to see them on a day-to-day basis. And we are losing that, and we lost that. But we want to make sure that we still have that in place and looking at what are the other methods of communication, looking at email, telephone calls, or even text messaging, so we're still not losing that connection that we have with our parents. And then we also want to make sure that we put some parameters in place of what we want to sure we did not do. And we didn't want to be guided by fear. No one knows what this disease is, this virus is going to be. It affects everyone so differently. You don't necessarily, there's a lot of information out there. And so we just want to make sure that we are not being guided by the rumors or what we understood, but just being guided, understanding what it is we want to provide our families. We knew that we could not give them less than what our families need. Our summer program last year is 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And we provide lunch, we provide breakfast, lunch, and also 2 snacks, engage in activities. And we did not want to give our parents any less than we've given them before, but also what are some ways that we also can enhance that. And we didn't want to be summer school, understanding, a lot of the concerns and things that students had do toward the end of the school years. We kind of communicated. We want to be very fun and engaging and really provide opportunities that they may not necessarily have going forward. And then one thing we really, and I can't stress this enough, we really realized was the work that it was going to take to get this done. Having like 3-hour Zoom meetings, because we got to figure out, how we're enrolling our parents, how we're going to communicate to our parents, how we're going to identify the activities, what are we going to do, how we're going to share that, and understand that took a lot of conversations. And 100%. Understanding the frustration in that, understanding the lack of being able to kind of engage with each other in a one-on-one space, but realizing that when it comes down to it, this is who we are as an organization, and this is what we've committed to say that we're going to provide. So what we ended up with in terms of providing was we're looking at providing summer activities from 8:30 to 5:30 on Canvas Learning Management System. A lot of schools and school districts utilize that to continue to do the distance learning. We wanted to have virtual meetings 3 times a day because we knew that our data suggests that a lot of our students continue to engage with us in our after school summer program because of the interaction that they have with their teachers. And we wanted to continue to provide that opportunity by having the virtual meetings. We call them Zoom rallies. And we're talking about social emotionals. The very first day of our summer camp, we talked about the feelings that the students are having. They're missing their friends. They're wanting to get out the house. They want to do more things outside. And so having a space to be able to kind of have those dialogues and then identifying what supports that we can put in place was really important. We did want to make sure we also touch on the academic. So utilize 2 personalized learning systems, Lexia Learning, that was highly recommended by the Barksdale Reading Institute, specifically to understand the challenges that students have in the summer slide and reading. And then MobiMax, a platform that we've utilized in our after-school program to help identify the direction of our tutorial services. As we then made the decision to go to a remote and virtual environment, we realized that not every household would have the technology they needed to do that. So we committed that for those families that we communicated with and identified, we will provide those devices and also the internet services. So there's 75 devices that we purchased and that we distributed to our families to ensure that they could participate as well. But then we also had to look at all facets of who we are as an organization. And so as a lead initiator of the statewide after-school network, we had a great opportunity in partnering with the networks across the nation and very much guided by Georgia statewide after-school network to develop and have these activities that we're utilizing in our summer program, but that these activities are available for anyone in the state who is also doing summer programming. These activities can be done in a virtual environment. They can be done in person, or they can be done where you can record a video and have the activities up. And this really was a godsend for us because just in the logistics of doing the virtual, having those activities has been really great. They're focused on social emotional learning, and it also has supports for families and some of the things that they may be facing, conversation to have with their children, but also with staff in terms of how can you identify different stress levels in youth and what are some of the things that you can do to be able to alleviate that. And then very recently and very fortunately, the support that we're giving to our parents. We understood by us going to a virtual and remote environment that's very different. Child care is a very real need. And we're kind of facing a child care crisis, and we'll be facing a child care crisis when we start going back to school. But and then it was really Robert who brought up the fact of, what if we're able to also give our families some financial support. And so we just very recently, as of last week, launched where we're giving all of our families that are participating in our summer program $500. And what we're just asking of them is to just kind of, continue to participate in the program, submit pictures that we can utilize in some of our communications to talk about this dynamic programming that we've created, but then also liking and sharing on Facebook so we can also spread our story. And it's really the feedback that we've gotten from our parents is overwhelming. That we're getting pictures and videos and just seeing how engaged the students are being over the course of the summer. And that was the real thing for us in terms of what is it that we want to do. So guided by who we are as an organization, understanding the value that we provide to our children and families, understanding what we must do, and then what we also should not do is really what helped guide us to develop this programming, looking at all aspects of what we do. And it's very much going to be the process we're going to continue as we're looking at what does after school supports look like in this new environment with the reopening of schools. How can we continue to support our children and families? How can we take the lead of our school districts, but also making sure that we're very much listening to the needs of our children, our families, our community partners, and our staff to make sure that we're providing this very much needed and well-rounded program. And we're fortunate enough to be involved in a lot of circles where these conversations are happening. The conversation of what does reopening look like is happening on a day-to-day basis, and we're involved in those conversations, offering up ideas, but also looking at resources that we then can continue to utilize for us here at Operation Shoestring, but also across the state.
That is amazing. Thank you, Amber and Robert. And yeah, this is a time of pivot, and I love the way that you all have done this and stepped up, and particularly around providing families new and different resources. So thinking about the financial assistance, thinking about internet access, thinking about the devices. I know that there are a lot of conversations going on right now around how to bridge the digital divide, but that those are big infrastructural changes. That does not necessarily mean that tomorrow things are going to be different. And so, you know, we can talk and plan, and that is necessary and important, and goes to something that Justin was talking about the how we get there. But it is folks like you who are working with families and children every day who have to be ready to help them both now and when the school bell rings, whether it's in person or through a microphone, in scarily probably a month or so. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I know there are a lot of organizations out there who could really use some conversations with y'all to figure out how to do what you're doing.
Right.
And so I want to pitch this idea to everybody who's out there. If you are interested in talking with Robert and Amber in a specific space that is really around how to help after school programs or programs that you may be doing that support families, and really want to pick their brain in more specific details, especially, you know, we're in summertime, the summer programming and how folks are dealing with that is a very unique situation, dealing with the PTSD that children and teachers and staff have, and how they are supporting them so they don't feel alone and trapped. Please let me know, email us, and we will set that up. If there is enough interest out there, we are more than happy. I spoke with Amber and Robert about this earlier. They are very willing to meet and have conversations around how organizations can effectively support children and families. And so please reach out to me and we can make that happen. So thank you, Amber and Robert. And I want to open it up. We have just about a couple of minutes for Q&A. So please, if there's anybody out there who has any comments or questions, feel free to share them now. Okay. While you're thinking, I want to highlight something, and so be thinking. Type it in the chat while I'm talking, and we'll circle back if I see anything. Yeah. All right, here we go. Doesn't this screen look familiar? Oh my goodness, I feel like we were just here, but I'm not going to talk about this, so don't sign out yet. If you happen to be on the training page because you've just registered for some amazing trainings and you're like, I don't want to stop with the Alliance, what more could I do? Teresa Erickson, why did you leave? I told you not to leave. Nobody touched the exit button. We're not done yet. If you go up to the top and you see initiatives and you click on Mississippi Illuminated, you hopefully have seen this campaign through social media on Facebook. This is in partnership with Volunteer Mississippi and the Hub Network, who you all have heard from many times over our weekly webinars. This is a project where we are trying to capture good things that are happening in the state. If there are great stories of success, of volunteerism, we want to hear it and we want to illuminate it. It is extremely easy to get caught up in the negativity and the sadness and the frustration of what's happening now. And that does not have to be the full narrative. And it isn't the full narrative of what's happening in our country, in particular in Mississippi. And so we want your help in this. So you'll see this beautiful graphic. We are believing in planting seeds of hope, right? So sunflowers, that's what we do in Mississippi. And you're gonna see this amazing video because it's great and we get to show up volunteers and you can be in the next one. And then you'll see share and illumination. If you have volunteers who are doing great things, if you have beautiful stories of how people are working to address this time, please share it with us. You can upload images or videos so that we can highlight that, and then we will post it here and on social media, and so you can kind of see a sampling where when you click on the pictures, you'll see the story behind it. We really want to lift up stories of hope and or seeds of hope and stories of brightness. So please help us out with this. We want your input. Okay, next, let's bounce back. I'm going to go back to Robert and Amber, and we have a comment from Tammy from Growing Up Knowing. For Robert and Amber, I'm so impressed with the thoughtful process you have engaged in to continue serving your families. I'd love to know if you found funding or other new partners specific for your new needs due to COVID.
Okay. I always throw the money questions to Robert.
And my mom's deceased, so she wouldn't care if I said that on air. But anyway, so let's see. The short answer is right when everything sort of turned upside down in March, we had a few folks step up with some money to help support some feeding of adults that Jackson Public Schools was doing, but their USDA funded feeding program wouldn't allow them to pay for. So we raised, I don't know, $25,000, $23,000 really quickly. Other than that, no, except one of our significant funders, which is Kellogg. We're one of those folks who's been fortunate enough to get Kellogg funding, stepped in with a generous summer grant program that allows us to do that $500 cash support to our families, which is an idea I stole from Springboard to Opportunity. So so that's really wonderful. We were actually in a fortunate position to have pretty good cash flow this winter, which is not always the case. We are, though, like everybody else, freaked out about what things will look like since we're going to stay in this for some time. I think this fall will be a daunting time for us. I don't know if everybody's feeling similarly. So we've seen about 40% of our revenue we raise locally from a variety of sources. We've already seen a steady downturn in that since March. We watch our numbers very closely, and so March, April, and May they're all down. It's down significantly. And we were careful, though, not to exploit in a negative way the crisis sort of to scream fire. We wanted to really wait until we had built out our summer program before we had a gentle pitch to ask sort of current folks to stay with us. And so that was strategic too. And but it's daunting, right? we're going to be in this place economically for some time. And how that manifests, particularly with kind of local donations, individuals, because again, 40% or so of our revenue, depending on the year, sometimes more than that, comes from kind of Mississippi people, congregations, smaller foundations. So anyway, that's where we are.
Thank you, Robert. So it is 10:02. I want to be respectful of time. So know that, again, that offer is out there. If you want to talk to and Kay, I see your message there. If you want to talk to Robert and Amber, please email me and we will get you hooked up. We know that there's a lot of interest and need for shared knowledge and shared perspectives and shared practices. And so, you know, let us help you get connected. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And as I said to some folks over the last few days, please don't light any fireworks. We have enough crises. We don't need to add fire to the list. So, you know, watch them from, I don't know, somewhere safe on TV, but have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful holiday. Please get some rest. Be safe, be well, and in honor of July 4th, please continue to make your voices heard and stand up for the rights of everybody in our country, and make sure that everybody who has and deserves the right to be an equal citizen and treated as such has that opportunity and has the right and ability to prosper. And so thank you for the work that you have done in Mississippi to get us to the point where we are able to take down a symbol of hate and division, and let's continue that work and your communities and the work that you do. So thank you, be safe, be well, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, Amber, Justin, and Robert.
Welcome, you're welcome.